Of the English Journey by J.B. Prestley. Whilst I was setting up to get myself in the mood, not that this is 30, 35 something years later, no doubt. I was listening to some of the themes to the James Bond films. I was just listening to Goldfinger. Yes, 35 years or so later from 1933. So much had happened in those 35 years. Graham Roffey says, if you're making tea, no sugar for me. I've already got halfway through my cup of tea, in actual fact, this morning. So sorry about that. Hello to Fiona Hammond. Hello to Philip Hammond. And hello to Graham. And I think we are the only ones here, but not to worry. Others will come trickling in, as indeed they do. Black coffee, 1 sugar. Sorry about that. I seem to have... didn't get the order in quick enough, you see. You've got to be quicker to get the order in. I was in the kitchen earlier. I can't go in there now. We're broadcasting. Hello, Lisa. Nice to see you also up there. Most of the morning I have spent dancing around, prattling about, and trying to get my back in order, which it is. I've been to Morrison's. I've been shopping. I'm going to do a beef. I've got a beef joint. I don't know what you call it. I don't know how to cook it. I'm going to shove it in the oven with a bit of tin foil for tomorrow. For tomorrow, Easter Sunday, for Sharifa and Billy, my son Billy and his girlfriend Sharifa. And I've got those long, what do you call them? Peppers, sweet peppers, the long sweet peppers. I'm going to roast a few potatoes, have a bit of a roast up. Tomorrow. So I thought I'd go into the shops today to get all I need, and I went in nice and early. Good morning to Audrey. Good morning to Leslie. Good morning to Deborah. Good morning. Yes, I'm in a jolly mood. Haven't managed to go out filming today, but then I did realise, and it's a bit overcast. It's nice. It's okay weather for filming. But morning, Andy. Good morning, Sarah. It's just that after I went round Morrison's, I thought, oh yeah, a bit achy this morning. Funny old thing. Just finishing listening to last night's reading. It was really great. Loved the chapter on the pottery. Oh yes, that was good. And so I thought, oh, actually, it's Saturday today, and Saturday traditionally, and I didn't do it last Saturday. Nobody noticed. Nobody said. May have noticed, but nobody said. I look a bit unshaven in today's video. I don't know. I do look a bit unshaven. That's because I am a bit unshaven, to be fair. And I did have a nice hot bath, but I forgot to shave. Should have shaved. I was desperate to get out to... Is the colours all right? Everything looks okay, doesn't it? What was I going to say? I was just saying something there that I've lost my own train of thread. My own train of thread. I've lost it. Where is that thread train? Come back, little thread train, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. We got off to a silly start because it's a bit like the Vogue show. Yes, the Sunday chat. That's what I've got to record today, at some point, for tomorrow. So that means I don't have to venture out. But also, I did think if I could get my little stepladder in here, I might record a video, if I can find it, some of my old film equipment. I don't know how much I've got up on the shelf up there, but I've got an old 16mm Scoopik, I think, and some reels of film and bits and pieces. I did think I could do something on that, if one can't get out. Anyway, this isn't getting anything doing. I'm wasting your time. You're wasting my time. My mum and me this year, just mum and me this year, so we're doing beef roast with young potatoes and carrots. Yes, good idea. What I'm going to do with my potatoes is I'm going to do hedgehog potatoes. Do you know hedgehog potatoes? Well, you get the young, like new potatoes. And what you do is you cut them along like that. So I don't know why they call them hedgehog potatoes, because they're more like massacred potatoes, really. They're you've got the long potato like that, and then you cut sort of a third or so into it and sprinkle some sugar on, not sugar, some salt, and the oil, bake them up like that. And also, I think cooking them is quite handy. And they get quite crispy then that way. Anyway, We're on chapter 8, ladies and gentlemen. We'll come back to hedgehog potatoes a bit later on, maybe, if you're lucky. And if you're not lucky, toughy. To Lancashire. Chapter 8 of J.B. Priestley's book. The next stage in my journey clearly was Lancashire, and I decided to begin with Liverpool. That city is not new to me. Less than a year before, I produced a play there at the Repertory Theatre, though I doubt if this can count as a visit, for my days and nights were spent either trying to keep awake in the theatre or trying to go to sleep in the hotel, a pitiful state of mind and body well known to all dramatic folk. I have never been to Liverpool in the spring, summer or early autumn. My visits have only been wintry. I find it impossible to imagine what the city looks like in bright, clear sunshine. I think of it existing in a shortened year, only running from November to February, with all its citizens forever wearing thick overcoats. Just before you reach Lime Street Station, your train runs into a deep cutting, and daylight promptly vanishes, never returning, I feel, until your homeward train has left Lime Street and Liverpool well behind. It has, in my memory, more fog about it than any other cities, except London. The centre is imposing, dignified and darkish, like a city in a rather gloomy Victorian novel. Does spring ever arrive in St. John's Gardens? Do the birds ever twitter and flutter before the solemn facade of St. George's Hall? Is there a Mersey, so much green, flowing water, not simply a is there a Mersey, so much green flowing water, not simply a misty nothingness hooting dismally? I must go there in June sometime to find out. Liverpool, yes, I went to Liverpool fairly recently, actually. Well, probably a year ago now. Funny old place. There was no deep, dark railway cutting for me on this occasion, for I arrived by road, and in place of the cutting were streets that went on and on and on through dreary regions infested by corporation trams. The surface of these trams was a slippery abomination. Though we were going very slowly, 3 times we were nearly near the top of pedestrians who started up. 3 times we were nearly on top of pedestrians who started up not 3 yards from our radiator and slithered about as if bent on suicide. When I was able to think, I began to gather together what I knew about Liverpool and remembered what I could from previous visits. Well, there was the Playhouse and its director, my friend William Armstrong, who considers himself, possibly with some truth, producing another... what? Oh, sorry. I'm doing a Vobes today, aren't I? Doing a Vobes, ladies and gentlemen. Well, let's see. I began to remember what I could about the place. Well, there was the Playhouse and its director, my friend William Armstrong, who considers himself, possibly with some truth, the busiest man in the city, for he's always watching one play, producing another, and making plans for the production of 2 more. His, I suppose, is the best repertory company in the kingdom. No other, except perhaps Birmingham, in its heyday, has so many brilliant young actors and actresses in bringing them into the West End. So I decided there was no room in this chronicle for William and the Playhouse. What, there was no... Oh, yes, but I decided there was no... Sorry, none of that. He's not doing it. He's just not doing it. On 2 previous visits, I had been given dinner at the University Club. A very jolly little club it is too, where they know how to turn Liverpool winter into something like summer, at least for one evening. Pleasant journalists, Mr. Macleany of the Liverpool Daily Post at the head of them, smiling professors and ladies and gentlemen, young barristers and shipping men, all very good company and as hospitable as you please. Let me admit that their Liverpool exists, and it does admirably. But it was not the Liverpool I wanted now. The Surgeons in Rodney Street, where Gladstone was born, with its fine late 18th century fronts. Where was it? The cathedral, which remained in my memory as a vast dark red bulk, immensely impressive but tantalising because it just missed being a noble expression of their own age. The building down by the river, such as the Dock Board offices, the Cunard and the Royal Liver Palaces. Unusual for Britain, as if Liverpool had so many peeps at New York's waterfront that it felt it must do something, but not material for me. But what else was there? Birkenhead, where the middle-class folk have comfortably established themselves on the villas on the hill. I'd had lunch and tea or two over there in solid Victorian comfort, but this time I wanted to see something quite different. The cotton brokers and the shipping men. I had both kinds. I'd met both kinds, and no doubt they would have a lot to say to me, and what they would say to me would be well worth hearing if I met them again. They were genuine Liverpool, I must admit to myself, but even they didn't fit into this mysterious composition that so far was purely negative. I had very little time, and the whole of Lancashire was waiting, and there was my new plan to attend to in Manchester at the weekend, for there was an opening there. So, what was it I wanted? We had now arrived in the heart of the big city, and as usual it was almost a heart of darkness. But it looked like a big city, there was no denying that. Here, emphatically, was the English seaport, second only to London. The very weight of stone emphasised that fact, and even if the sun never seems to rise properly over it, I like a big city to proclaim itself a big city at once. If it must have 1,000 corporation trams lumbering and screeching and groaning about the place, let it build up, as Liverpool has done, to dwarf mournful beasts. We had cut and curved our way to the very entrance, the imposing entrance of the Adelphi Hotel. I believe the Adelphi was originally built for a first-class Atlantic passenger traffic, and unfortunately for Liverpool and its luxury hotel, that traffic was immediately and afterwards diverted to Southampton, with the result that the Adelphi has been hot from mingled shame and vexation ever since, rather too hot for my comfort, even in the dead winter of Liverpool. But there I was, signing my name in the register, and as yet I had no programme of exploration. This was a Liverpool I wanted for this book. There was a Liverpool I wanted for this book, and I still hadn't decided what it was. But I know it was something quite unlike the interior of the Adelphi, which is a hotel that no producer of musical comedy would object to using for his big set in the second act. What was it then? Up to my bedroom, I reminded myself that it was probably Liverpool Seaport that contained what I wanted. I'd been to Southampton and Bristol, and I was on my way up to Tyne and Hull, but there was something here that none of these ports could show me. The search was narrowing. I began telephoning one or two newspaper acquaintances in the city. I was on the trail. It led me to the vicar of the queerest parish in England, his own description, and I'm not going to quarrel with it. He was an elderly man, and had been there many great years, during which time, knowing so much about his people, he must have accumulated enough of the raw material of fiction for a batch of Balzacs. There was nothing of the mild, faintly scholarly doddery about him. He was still a sturdy figure, and as downright as a bosun. We set out to explore this queer parish of his, which was in the middle of Liverpool's more picturesque and exotic slums, populated by the human flotsam and jetsam of a great old seaport. We had not gone 20 yards when he pointed his stick at some figures mooching in the square. I call it the Folksall walk, he reminded me. Old soldiers, just watch them, you see. A few short paces away, then the same number again. Oh, sorry, I am reading this with such difficulty and such crapability. Crapability Vobes, you can call me today. Started off full of zest and falling down into a great crevice of bad reading. Yet again! I am struggling. I don't know why I keep struggling. It's very irritating. What are we saying in the old thing? Let's see what we've got. Lovely Judith is there. Hello, Judith. Leslie, I'm late too, so not sure. Morning, Judith, says a number of people. Ed Loud, hello to you. Morning. Raymond Boo, new muscle relaxer. Oh, good. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, fantastic. Let me just carry on with this dreadful reading today. I was in such fine spirits as well. Come on, Vobes. Pull yourself together. You can do this. A man of your limited talents, surely just reading words cannot be that difficult. Old sailors, he said. Just watch 'em. You see. A few short paces one way, then the same number back. That's what they do all day. It's the result of spending years in ships. That's what the Foxhall walk is. We passed near the men, and he waved a greeting with his stick. The neighbouring streets and squares all belong to one period, the Regency, or a little earlier. Here, 100 years ago, the comfortable Liverpool merchants lived, going in and out of these charming doorways and beneath these fine old fanlights, thinking about their cargoes of cotton and tobacco from New Orleans, or of rum and sugar from Jamaica. You only had to half close your eyes and look at these charming, dignified facades to feel that the past was revealing itself to you. Liverpool must have been a town worth loitering in then. All this area of it must have been as pretty as an old print, and why it is that in 1833 you could still order a house from the nearest builder, and it would be something fit to be seen, whereas 100 years of astonishing progress, and in 1933 the nearest builder would probably erect a monstrosity, and you would have to find a really good architect, who in turn has to find a really good contractor, before you can be sure of getting a decent house. Never a truer word there. And I write not as a worshipper of the past, an antique snob, a connoisseur, but as an ordinary ignoramus who happens to use his eyes. I like that. But one good look, and that charming vision vanished. The fine lines and the carefully designed doorways remained, but they had suffered a bad sea change. The owners lived there no longer. The crew had taken possession. These were all slum tenements, like those Georgian streets in Dublin where the country gentry had once had their town houses. You were, in fact, reminded once of Dublin. Every bit of woodwork was fast losing its last flakes of paint. The windows were broken, boarded, raggedly curtained. The open doors gave out a reek of unwashed humanity. The buildings were rotting away, and some of the people were rotting with them. Faces that had shone for a season in brothels in Victoria's time now peered and mumbled at us. Port Said, and Bombay, Zanzibar, Hong Kong had called here. The babies told their tale plainly enough. They were of all shades, and Asia and Africa came peeping out of their eyes. That little chap there, said the vicar, pointing with his stick at an Ocheous. Here's a word, Ochreous. What is that? Ocheous. No, I'm not reading it. Ochreous. Pointing his stick at an ochreous baby lad who might have been just plucked out of the rice field. He is one of 4, all with different fathers, and his mother is a nice woman of a very good sort. Everybody's of a good sort in these books, aren't they? We hurried off to the local school that all these half-caste children attended. By the time we got there, the little ones were leaving, and my companion singled out several of them who answered his smiling questions with very softly and shyly. All the faces of mankind were there, wonderfully mixed. Imagine an infant class of half-castes, quadroons, octoroons, with all the latitudes and longitudes confused in them. This is an interesting way of putting it. I saw all their things, baby-sized, neatly put away in the cupboards, and they had done this themselves. They could have been pictured in the act, not as Liverpool infants class, but as the human race, which is probably still a baby, trying to tidy up. On the floor above a class of older children, which had not yet been dismissed, the vicar marched me in to look and listen to them. There cannot be a queerer class anywhere in the world. The woolly curls of the babies, the smooth brown skin of the Malay, the diagonal eye of the Chinese, they were all there, crazily combined with features that had arrived in Lancashire by the way of half a dozen little European countries, from Scandinavia to Italy. Nor did their appearance tell the whole tale. Indeed, it could be oddly deceptive. A boy could look pure Liverpool and prove to be 3 parts Chinese. Various influences were obvious. One little girl looked ready to bud into another Florence Mills. A handsome, sturdy lad with a fine head, proudly carried, and big flashing eyes, was the grandson of an African chieftain. As the class finished their work for the day, the vicar, who knew all about every one of them, softly poured a stream of information into my ear. We spoke to several of the children when the class broke up. The boys rushed down to the tiny schoolyard at the back, and there, in the dusky half-light, had a glorious scuffle with a small ball. We could see them down there like miniature League of Nations assembly gone mad. Meanwhile, the vicar went on telling me things. The children with the Chinese strains in them were interested. Children with the Chinese strain in them interested him the most. Many of the boys, he said, would probably go to China within a few years. An uncle of one of them was now an important official in the Chinese Republican government, and he too had once been a boy in Liverpool and was now bitterly opposed to Britain and the British influence because of the life he had once been compelled to lead in the slums of Pitt Street, Liverpool. It was more than likely, he continued, that most of the little half-caste girls those smiling exotic dolls would, within a year or two of leaving school, become prostitutes, following the female family tradition of the quarter. I suggested that some of them, especially those with the Negro blood in them, might prove to have theatrical talent, like the high yallas of Harlem. But he replied that in his experience they had never shown any signs of possessing such talent. But had they been given a chance? I doubt it. A rosy little boy who had been kept behind with some monitor's job came up, and we had a word or two with him. When he had gone, the vicar said, "Now that boy looks English enough, doesn't he? But as a matter of fact, he's half Chinese. Yes, and he's all Chinese inside. His dreams, that boy, they're all Oriental dreams. Queer, isn't it?" He went on to outline briefly a theory of his born from long experience of these people of mixed blood. The real nature of these half-castes, he said, is always the opposite of their appearance. If they look European, you can depend on it that inside they're almost entirely Chinese or Negro or whatever it is. If they're born half and half and they look Chinese or Negro, then you'll find that their nature is European. It's very odd, and I don't know why it should be, but it is so. I've proved it over and over again. As things are, and there are some very cruel things about this relation between appearance and character, for clearly the unfortunate half-caste will always be most attracted to the people whom his looks will alienate, and will always belong at heart to the particular society prepared to welcome him. Not quite sure where that's centre. As things are, there is something cruel about this relation between appearance and character, for clearly the unfortunate half-caste will be always most attracted to the very people whom his looks will alienate, and will always belong at heart to the particular society not prepared to welcome him. It's an odd thought. This was something deeply impressive but moving about there was something deeply impressive, almost moving about the sight of these strange children here in this slum corner of Lancashire. Although they had mostly been forgotten, born and reared in the most pitiful, sordid circumstances, nearly all of them were unusually attractive in appearance, like most people of oddly mixed blood. A really first-rate film producer could make a film of exceptional interest, probably of real beauty, out of these children. Looking at them, you didn't think of the riff-raff of the Stokeholds and the slatterns of the slums who had served as their parents. They seemed like charming exotic fruits, which indeed they were, of some profound anthropological experiment. I can't get my tongue around that word. And that woman, who had had 4 children by different fathers, probably all a different race, deserves a subsidy from some anthropological research. Perhaps we had been given a glimpse into the world of 2433, by which time the various root races, now all members of the great world state, may have largely intermarried and interbred. It's getting quicker than you think, mate. Knowing gentlemen from the topics or the East always tell us emphatically that the half-caste is no good, a poor specimen combining the vices but not the virtues of both the races. This is what they tell us, and most of those who listen, perhaps sceptically, cannot marshal enough examples to prove to the contrary. We only remind ourselves that the violent racial prejudices still exist. All the dice are loaded against the children of mixed blood, the very circumstances of whose parentage have probably been unfortunate. But nature itself, whatever she may do to them in later life, displays no sharp animosity against these half-caste infants, but takes care to work most cunningly and beautifully with their physical characteristics. And I wish it were possible to learn what happens to these quaint children, where they go, what they do, what manner of men and women they'll turn into. Will some of them, after extraordinary adventures and vicissitudes, be found, years hence, negotiating with us in China and defining us in Africa, inspired by memories of England that do not extend beyond the tenements and dark streets in a dockside slum? My goodness, it's quite grim, isn't it? We are busy trying to fit square pegs into round holes. Yes, they are the product of their time, says Leslie Crouch. So sad for the little children. It is, isn't it? It's very sad, but fascinating also for how people thought back in those days. Liverpool's Chinatown is rapidly dwindling. There are only a few hundred Chinese left. In the quarter we explored, now gathering mystery in the dark of a November afternoon, there were still some signs of their occupation. You noticed a Chinese Republican club and a Chinese Masonic hall. There were a few Chinese shops selling ivories and tea. We wanted some tea ourselves, so climbed the stairs of a Chinese eating house. The room was deserted, except for 2 Chinese, one of them, I think the proprietor, playing a card game in the corner. A shy girl, who appeared and disappeared like an oriental ghost, bought us some good China tea, and over it we talked in whispers. I learned that there were two good reasons why this Chinatown was rapidly disappearing. The first was bad trade, for the Chinese go where there is money to be made, and there has not been much money to be made in Liverpool during these past few years. The second reason is that the Chinese find that they cannot live here as they would like to live. There is too much interference with their customs. After all, I suppose if our countrymen who carry the white man's burden in the East suddenly found themselves prevented from indulging in sport, meeting in clubs and drinking gin and whisky, they would linger longer in exile. They would not linger longer in exile. The Chinese, I believe, are very fond of gambling, have a weakness for secret societies, and like to smoke opium. And no doubt this makes them liable to be brought before a magistrate, who himself perhaps has been known to have a flutter on the turf, is a Freemason, and is always irritable after dinner unless he smokes his usual La Ragana. Not all of the Chinese who used to live here have gone back to the East. A good many of them, I was told, has moved to Rotterdam. There used to be racial street fights here at one time, but there has not been one now for several years. Perhaps they are having them in Rotterdam. We didn't stay longer over our tea, but moved on through the narrow, darkening streets. Many of the houses in these streets used to be brothels, and some still are. Women are being smuggled into Liverpool even yet, in spite of the determined local effort to stop the supply. It made me wonder where on earth such women came from, if they could allow themselves to be smuggled into these holes, and could consider a life behind these yellowed lace curtains as a career. We made for the docks. I'd seen the docks before, but oddly enough, although I sailed to and from Hull, Goole, Harwich, Tilbury, and the Pool of London, Dover, Folkestone, Newhaven, Southampton, Plymouth, and Avonmouth, I have yet never arrived or departed from this port of Liverpool. Nor am I sorry, for they have always seemed to be the most gloomy docks. That romance of the sea about which we have always heard and read so much has to set its opening chapter in some very dismal quarters of this country. Trams going whining down long sad roads, a few stinking little shops, pubs with their red blinds down, an accumulation of greasy papers under the windows, black pools and mud and slippery cobblestones. High blank walls, a suspicious policeman or two, that's the usual opening scene. You see it in London, you see it in Liverpool, miles of it, docks and slums, docks and slums. We are an island people, yet we owe nearly everything to the sea. Our foodstuffs are brought in by ship, and our manufactures are taken away in ships. But when you visit most of the larger ports, you see nothing but slums. "Welcome," we cry to the sailor, and immediately we make him free of Wapping, London, and Wapping. What? And immediately make him free of Wapping, London, and Wapping, Liverpool. If there is anything to choose between these two Wappings, I didn't realise there was a Wapping in Liverpool, the London one has it. I caught a glimpse of the other one that afternoon. We reached the docks, put out our pipes, and entered the precincts, where a vast amount of gloom and emptiness and decay was being carefully guarded. It was deep dusk. There were some last feeble gleams of sunset in the shadowy sky before us. Everything now was shadowy. The warehouses we passed seemed empty of everything but shadows. A few men, far too few, came straggling along after their day's work. We arrived at the edge of the Mersey, and below us was a long mud bank. The water was grey and mysterious, a mere vague thickening of space. Something hooted to break the silence that immediately closed up and afterwards muffled the whole spectral scene. We walked slowly along the waterfront, from nothing, it seemed, into nothing, and darkness rose rather than fell. And with it came a twinkling of lights from Birkenhead that reached us not across the river, but over a gulf that could not be measured. I have rarely seen anything more spectral and melancholy. It was hard to believe that by taking ship here you might eventually reach a place of sharp outlines, a place where colour burned and vibrated in the sunlight, that here was the gateway to the bronze ramparts of Arabia, to the temples and elephants of Ceylon, to the flying fish and humming birds and hibiscus. With our hands thrust deep in our overcoat pockets, we trudged along and walked about Liverpool's trade, a fitting topic for the time and place. Oh, they talked about it, not walked. They talked about the trade. On the way back from the docks, I was shown David Lewis Club and Hostel. The club is largely maintained by profit on the The club is largely maintained by the profit on the hostel. It looked a good place. There is a amusing little theatre on the premises, with a room below filled with bits of scenery, half-painted canvas cloths and odd props. There are reading, chess and card rooms. I was told by one of the officials that the club had a contract bridge team. This is the first time I've heard of working men playing bridge, to say nothing of playing in tournaments. There is a chess team too. If I lived in the district, I do not suppose I would be able to win a place at either team, but it would be not for want of trying, for I should certainly spend a lot of time in that club. It is a rather old-fashioned building and needs some brighter decoration, but with its cosiness and recreations and companionship, it must seem like heaven after those long, dark, slummy Liverpool streets. The hostel is next door, and it is an enormous establishment. A man can live there on 1 and 9pence a day, and he will not have to be very sensitive about his surroundings. It has a very grim institutional look. The distempered walls and old-fashioned tiles cry at once, "No nonsense here, my man." The hundreds of men that have been glad of its existence, I have no doubt whatever. Hundreds of men have been glad of its existence, I have no doubt whatever, but I cannot imagine that one of them returning after an absence, breaking down in the hall and sobbing at the sight of dear old Hostel. Nowadays, it's only about half full because of the trade depression, which means that there are fewer casual labourers, and like the drifting... My eyes are just dancing about. Nowadays it's only half full because of the trade depressions, which means there are a fewer casual labourers and the like drifting into the city. But though only half full, it smelt completely full. It's not exactly a dirty smell, for the place was clean enough and I should imagine well disinfected, but it was like that of the thick air that meets you when entering the underground. The dining room was very large and had a counter in one corner where you bought your food. I saw a man buying a plate of stewed steak. This was 6pence, and the dearest item on the menu, but you got a good plateful. The lodgers all have boxes in lockers and keep tea things in them. I noticed several of them making their own tea. They can do their own washing too, though I didn't get a chance to see any of them doing it. Upstairs are floors and floors of cubicles, dreary little holes. Not much seems to have been done at any time to make the building cheerful or attractive. The men I saw there were fairly mixed lot, with elderly casual labourers in the majority. There were one or two intensely respectable-looking middle-aged men, spruce as bank managers, and they were all busy writing letters, probably the sort of begging letters that I'm always receiving, in which the writer is nearly always an elderly ailing woman with a number of ailing children. Many of them, I don't know what he means by that. Many of the men who lodge here are married, and sometimes their wives come looking for them and make trouble. Do they indeed? There is very little trouble with the men themselves, few roaring drunks and mad fighting men, all quiet, tamed, broken in and nearly broken down. Walking round and not very hopeful, I asked myself how long I could stick living here on my 1 and 9pence a day. I came to the conclusion that if I felt it was purely a temporary lodging or halfway house between two homes, then I could stand it for a week or perhaps a month. I should not be living at this hostel, but simply living in hope and faith. I should sit near the stove in the dining room, plotting like mad, and probably turning out some pretty artful begging letters. I should dream dreams in my little cubicle. But if I was convicted for here for the rest of my life, it would either be this hostel or something in this hostel or something worse. Then I think I would leave it one night. Oh, God, sorry, I really can't even see the words now. But if I was convinced that for the rest of my life it would be either this hostel or something worse, I think I should leave it, and for one night, one very long night, take a room somewhere near a gas fire. Such places as this seem particularly pitiful, because they are so largely occupied by elderly gentlemen. Young men have always hopes of a better job. They can go out and larken about and fall in love, and they can make light of such discomforts and indignities. After all, I've lived under much worse conditions than these throughout most of the war. But elderly men have none of these compensations. They're on the wrong side of the hill with darkness below them. They need comfortable little homes of their own, some dignity and peace. Some day, perhaps, they will have their chance of these things. Even the feeblest and little shufflers and even the feeblest little shuffler and idler. Yes, why deny even that poor creature his fireside and his armchair at night? We can create a society big and generous enough to give away these pathetic little comforts, and to be sorry for the pathetic fellow who receives them because he's so weak and pointless, and is condemned to be among those who take and cannot give. Cool, blimey. I'm going to pause there because, as you can hear, I was just struggling this morning. It's funny how the words dash about. Let's have a look. So true. Yeah. Morning, Linda. Morning. This could be Rotterdam or anywhere. Liverpool. I know a song about that. Very honest. Good morning, Richard. Can't blame being busy. Just forgot. Oh, right. Yeah, fair enough. How are we doing on the time? 10:13. Pretty dreary. I did go to Liverpool. I didn't like it, really. I didn't like it at all. There's a tiny bit more before we get to the end of this section. I'll just try and read to there. Just give my eyes a bit of a break. It is quite... Some day, I don't know why, some days it's trickier than others. I'm enjoying it, though. I hope you're enjoying it. I wish I could read better. I wonder if there's a course you can go on to help you read better. Slowing down, of course, is the best thing. Reading it before you read it, is another. Not doing it live in front of people is probably another. But it's good training. I always think these things are good training because you know ultimately you will get better. Don't stop for the mistakes. They make you who you are. Yes, I'll take that as an insult. No, I mean, I'll take that as a compliment. They make you who I... Well, yes, but nobody really... I mean, when I've listened back to some of them. I haven't watched many of these because I can't bear to see me cock up, really. It must be the most... Because when I hear other people who can't read, and they're stumbling over their words, it's just... so different. It's like hearing a bit of classical music and getting bum notes. It's like, oh, and I hate that. Without the mistakes, people sound like machines. Small font on yellow paper doesn't help. No, that's true. I have actually ordered another copy of this because this one's falling to bits. And it did strike me that if I do follow in his footsteps and go to some of these places as the Bald Explorer, it would be nice to have a better version of the book rather than one that the pages are likely to fly out of the train carriage. But I was just thinking about this, actually. He's visiting mostly cities and industrial places. So it's interesting because his English journey is not the English journey that I would choose to do. I wouldn't choose to go to the cities, especially now, because I think that many cities just look very much the same. They've got that same sort of cosmopolitan feeling where the quest for England that I'm seeking and the heritage of England, I feel, would have elements that are still alive in the smaller towns and the villages and so forth, rather than in the cities. Although the architecture was probably there, and it would be interesting to compare. I mean, there he was saying about the mixed race people that were coming in the 1930s, and then clearly after the Second World War, a lot more, and now that's just normal. It's not an unusual thing. And it would be unusual if you went to a city and there were no mixed-raced people or any other races at all. If they were all completely white, English white people, it would be peculiar to go into a city and see that, because you'd be going, hello, I walked into a backwater. But in 1940s, in the 1930s, clearly, only 90 years ago. That's a fascinating thing. Let's see if I can just do this last page and a half, and then there's a natural break. And hopefully, then he goes to Manchester after that. But he hasn't really painted much of a picture of Liverpool. Of course, Liverpool at that stage, 1933, the Beatles hadn't happened. The 60s hadn't happened. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? There is a very large Irish quarter in Liverpool. 2 cheerful young journalists took me across the city to see it. Paddy's Market was about to finish business for the day. A few lascars, like men, cut out of brown paper, lurked in the entrance. All the seamen know this covered market, where they frequently come to replenish their wardrobes. And by wardrobes, I'm sure they don't actually mean, wooden boxes. I think they mean their clothes, don't they? Even those natives who have never seen England before and speak no English can ask for Paddy Marquis, as if the place were our pride and joy, the diadem of the empire. It is surrounded by slum streets, dirty little pubs, and the Irish. A great many speeches have been made and books written on the subject of what England has done to Ireland. I should be interested to hear a speech and read a book or two on the subject of what Ireland has done to England. If we do have an Irish republic as our neighbour, and it is found possible to return her exiled citizens, what a grand clearance there will be in all the western ports, from the Clyde to Cardiff. What a fine exit of ignorant and dirt and drunkenness and disease. The Irishman in Ireland may, as we are so often assured he is, be the best fellow in the world, only waiting to say goodbye to the hateful empire, so that, free and independent at last, he can astonish the world. But the Irishman in England, too often cuts a miserable figure. He has lost his peasant virtues, whatever they are, and has acquired no others. The Irish flocked over here to be navvies and dockhands and casual labourers, and God knows that the conditions of life for such folk are bad enough. But the English of this class generally make some attempts to live as decently as they can under these conditions. Their existence has been turned into an obstacle race, an obstacle race, which the most monstrous and with the most monstrous and gigantic obstacles, but you may see them straining and panting still in the race. From such glimpses as I have had, however, the Irish appear in general never to have even tried. They have settled in the nearest poor quarter and turned it into a slum, or finding a slum, have promptly settled down to out-slum it. And this in spite of the fact that nowadays being an Irish Roman Catholic is more likely to find a man a job than to keep him out of one. There are very large numbers of them in Liverpool, and though I suppose there was a time when the city encouraged them to settle in it, probably to supply cheap labour, I imagine Liverpool would be glad to be rid of them now. After the briefest exploration of its Irish slums, I began to think that Hercules himself will have to be brought back and appointed Minister of Health before they will be properly cleaned up, though a seductive call or two from De Valera across the Irish Sea might help. But he will never whistle back these bedraggled wild geese. He believes in Sinn Féin for Ireland, not England. The two journalists and the two trams brought me back to the centre of the city, whose essential darkness made a good background for quite a metropolitan display of neon lighting and flashing signs. Cinemas, theatres, though Liverpool could do with several more, dance halls, grill rooms, boxing matches, cocktail bars, all in full glittering swing. The Adelphi Hotel had dressed for the evening, and it was playing waltzes, and for the time being didn't care a fig about the lost Atlantic traffic. In the restaurant there were little birthday parties, tender reunions, and commercial gentlemen entertaining foreign customers. I heard them, and exchanging slow little speeches in which the syllables were all spaced out as if they are in children's reading primers. In here, as they might have said, it was all very pleasant and comfortable and even gay, luxurious. I'd had a long day and was tired and was rather depressed. I wished then that I had somebody with me for dinner, if only as an excuse to do their... I wish I had had someone... so it's funny how sometimes you can just fill in the blanks before you've even read the word, with not the right words. I wished then that I had had someone dining with me, if only as an excuse to do the pair of us proud, to order a lot of food and drink and chatter and laugh a good deal. But I'm not old enough yet, and perhaps I never will be, to sit down solemnly to do myself proud, going through the full ritual of food and liquor. I still eat quickly, swallow one glass of something, and go on thinking all the time. And that night, this was all wrong. I didn't want to go on thinking. I wanted to eat and drink and have a party, chiefly because I couldn't get it out of my head that I was here, perched on a little lighted apex that was going down on every side of a very long slope. It was the beastliest pyramid you can imagine. I didn't want to be at the top, but still less did I want to be further down, and on any of those horrible slopes. I wanted to be off the thing altogether and enjoying myself. Miserably, I decided that someone else must give a plain fair account of this city. The task in time was beyond me, so I bought myself a good cigar. Clearly he didn't like it. Didn't like Liverpool at all. And he couldn't wait to get out of the blooming place. And I certainly didn't enjoy reading that chapter myself, to be honest with you. But there we are. Maybe you should read Bill Bryson's Notes from a Small Island. Yeah, I've read that. See what the Americans thought of Britain in 1995. Yeah, I did actually. He talks about the buses, doesn't he? Trying to get on these buses, going from one place to another and hanging about and trying to, 2 hours for the next bus in some godforsaken place in Devon, I think, as I seem to remember. Surprisingly true in England, even as an Englishman or woman, someone of only Angle's blood, Anglo-Saxon perhaps, they were immigrants, maybe Celtic blood too, Norman, Viking, and who knows what. In America, most of us wouldn't be who we were if it wasn't for the races mixing. That's true, I suppose. The British would never have had an empire without the Irish, says Michael. I have all that and two. Saxons, Norman and Vikings, says Lisa. Linda says, love Bill Bryson and have every one of his books. I've got quite a few of his books. I enjoyed his, what was it, A Walk in the Woods, where he goes along the Appalachian Trail, I think it is. That was interesting. I think he redid these Notes from a Small Island, didn't he? Revisited it and do that. Maybe if he wasn't rude to everybody, someone would sit down with him and eat with him. Well, that's very true. Yeah, clearly. I mean, I guess he's going round the country in 1933, and it is 90 years ago. So much has changed. I think it's difficult to even now to have an idea, even how clever we all are, knowing what we know and being able to look at Pathé News and footage and stuff, even really to get an idea of what it must, because we can't forget what we know. You know, we know what life is like. We've got the internet and we can use Google and we can, we know what's happening. We know where we're going. We know what happened after 1933 as we got into the Second World War and all the amazing things that happened, the 60s and flower power and that sort of thing. But they're in 1933, they're in this desperate slump. And as he's, and he's looking, it seems to me, for a bit of gaiety, because he keeps referencing theatres. And he is a theatre man. He wrote plays as well as novels, but he wrote plays. And, he's looking at mankind, and I think he's just seeing suffering. He's seeing, obviously, the rich people, and he and as he said, he didn't really like that. He didn't really like the top end. There was that disparate difference. There was no sort of middle class really as such. There was the people who were making money and doing very well, and then there were just these pitiful people that he saw hundreds and hundreds of. And then he would see the people in the factories, and he put a good shine on it, I suppose, didn't he, about saying how they all seemed to be enjoying themselves. But even then, he was a bit of a celebrity going round these theatres, and you can't help feeling that when he was invited to the factories, they're putting on a show. Everyone's like, well, put your best bib and tucker on, and you all look smiling, and put your fags out round there, So he's seeing stuff. Some of the stuff he's seeing, which is, I don't think, is an accurate account of what it really would have been when he's being taken around the factories, because he's a bit of a celeb, and everyone's, But then when he's going around in Liverpool there, I think that's truthful. I think that's probably what he saw. He probably saw these Irish, and there probably was that feeling that, they would out-slum us. I think that's an incredible insight, really. Hard-working and very desperate men. I'm hearing funny chimes in the other room. I've got a suspicion it might be a phone. It's like somebody banging on bottles. Don't know if you can hear that. Anyway, I better go and find out what he says. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this morning. Something a bit different today. He goes to Manchester, so let's hope that Manchester is going well. We've got about a third of the book left to go, and I have been looking at potential other candidates of things to read, perhaps not quite so dour as Monsieur le Prestley's thing, and hopefully better alarm. Phone alarm. No, it's not. It's not a phone alarm actually. I think it's somebody trying to contact me on Skype. Although Skype doesn't go like that, so I don't know. It may not even be my phone. Anyway, oh, you can hear it too. Oh, well done. Glad it wasn't just me. Thank you for watching. I'll try and be better next time. Always have the intention to do far better than actually I did. Which is so irritating. But hey, not irritating that I was trying to do better, if you see what I mean. I'm going to shut up now because I'm turning myself into an idiot. Turn yourself into an idiot, sir. I'll catch up with you later. Have a good day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.